So Bill Maher went on Joe Rogan's podcast, and here's a clip from the podcast. I didn't listen to the whole thing, but I did take a look at this clip, which is Bill Maher discussing the Trump indictments and the 2024 election. And what you're going to see here is Joe Rogan and Bill Maher debate Trump versus Biden. I thought this was interesting. Let's listen and we'll break it down.
So he just goes along with all the woke nonsense because he doesn't want to fight that wing of his party. He can't afford to have a battle on the left.
I mean, I think he's talking about Biden, but I have no idea what he's talking about. The idea that like Biden is woke or Biden is appeasing the woke is hilarious. Biden is the least quote-unquote woke person on the planet. Every day, he's roughly 17 seconds away from dropping an ethnic slur and not realizing it, right? He's the guy who he would have a gaffe every other minute back when he was vice president. Remember when he was on camera being like, man, you can't walk into a 7-Eleven without seeing an Indian behind the counter. You know what I'm saying? I don't know where this argument comes from. the sleepy 80-year-old white man, somehow he's super woke. Did Biden change his pronouns to they, them? I'm unaware of this.
That's my big issue with him. I know you have others.
Well, my biggest issue is he lies a lot, and he's probably...
Well, certainly not more than Trump.
Oh,
please. Come
on,
man.
Listen, I think they both lie.
There is literally no doubt that Donald Trump lies way more than Joe Biden. It is not remotely comparable. You remember this? Washington Post counts 30,573 false or misleading claims in 4 years by Trump. Look, let's be kind and say, hey, maybe the criteria is off, maybe the standards aren't right, maybe they're categorizing some things as lies when they're not necessarily lies. Let's be super kind. Let's more than cut it in half. 15,000 false or misleading claims in 4 years by Trump. It's not remotely close. These things are not equal. Biden, for whatever issues I have with him, is nowhere near as big a liar as Trump is.
Because if you want to talk about Trump, we can talk about Trump. But if you just talk about Biden, I don't think comparing him to Trump does anybody any good.
I mean, the reason people do that is because it is very likely they will be running against each other again. Look, I don't want that to be the case. I'd rather have Marianne Williamson on the Democratic side and literally anybody but Trump on the other side. That would be my preference. But right now, the likelihood is, the probability is it's going to be Trump versus Biden. That's why people are comparing them to each other, which is something you kind of have to do in an election where either the Democrat or the Republican is guaranteed to win.
Well, it does because they're running against each other.
Yeah, okay.
So it's kind of necessary.
It could if you want to talk about in terms of an election, but you talk about in terms of the guy who's in office right now, like why don't I like him? Well, one of the things that I don't like has nothing to do with any of his choices, is that he's mentally compromised. I think there's something wrong, and I think it's clear.
As if the other guy isn't.
Well, okay, he speaks much clearer. He might be crazy. He might be a sociopath.
He is crazy. He's crazy and stupid.
Say all those things, but it still doesn't take away from the fact that there's something wrong with Biden. Like, he makes up words, he stumbles through things. It seems like he doesn't know where he is half the time. He's very, very old. That's my problem with him.
Okay. Well, again, we're living in a world where perfect is not on the menu. These are the choices we're going to have. This is going to be who's running next time. You're going to have a doddering old man.
Do you definitely think that Biden's going to make it to the 2024 elections? Because I'm not convinced.
Well, who knows? Yeah, he might not, and some might not Trump.
Right. Oh, both of them could die at any minute now.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're like 70, whatever years old, 78 years old.
One is 77, one is 80.
Yeah, that's the end of the line.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're on E.
I mean,
right? You might make it to town, but you might die on the side of the road.
There's also blue zones where people live to 100.
They don't look like those guys.
No, they look better.
Yeah, they're thin and active.
Biden's thin.
That's
Trump
true.
is not.
But he's thin, like skeletal thin.
Yeah.
Like he's thin, like frail. Like where he looks like he's just going to fall down a lot.
I'll give you this point. Trump looks a lot and sounds a lot more hardy and robust and healthy. That's true. He's a city roach. He might eat the worst things he eats, the stronger he gets. You cannot kill him. No, I
He's
agree.
also the only guy that didn't noticeably age the moment he got into the White House.
No, we did. We aged when he was in office. He was fine. You're right. He didn't look like he aged. He always looks the same. But he's a criminal, and he's crazy, and he's stupid. And crazy and stupid are two different things.
When you say crazy, what do you base it
Okay,
on?
let me give you an example. Stupid is like Frederick Douglass is alive, or the stealth bomber is literally invisible.
Right.
Or nobody knew healthcare was hard to solve. That's just stupid. He's very stupid.
Bill Maher is without a doubt the smuggest man on the planet, but I have to admit, at least when he points it in the right direction, it's enjoyable. At least when he says things that are factually accurate, it's fun. It's enjoyable. It's only when he's like horribly, miserably wrong that his smugness becomes unbearable.
It's important that the crowd at my inauguration was the biggest ever. And I'm going to make an issue of this for the first 2 weeks of my presidency, despite photographic evidence to the contrary. Or I'm going to steal these documents that I don't even know what they are and I don't care, and I'm going to put them next to the toilet at Mar-a-Lago, and then I'm going to fight you to take them back, or not conceding the election. Those things are crazy. Or thinking I can somehow charm Kim Jong-un in Korea, although that might be stupid. Sometimes it crosses the line between both. But he's both stupid and crazy, and he's a criminal. You know, he's not being charged in these trials because he's a liar. They purposely didn't do that. Apparently it's okay. It's not illegal to lie to the American people. And of course he did lie and continues to lie. He still hasn't conceded the election, which he plainly lost. He's charged with actual crimes. Criminal intent to obscure, I forget what the actual name of the law is, but criminal intent to basically steal the election or to coerce people in the states from, I forget what it is. And then there's one forgery, which has to do with the elector scheme.
There's 91 criminal charges in total. Some of them have to do with business fraud and tax fraud. There's some stuff like that going on in New York. Then you have the Georgia case, which is the RICO case, basically criminal enterprise case over the attempt to steal the election, the 11,000 votes and all that stuff. And the Jack Smith D.C. case over January 6th, and that's a similar case. There's a lot of crossover with the Georgia case, but 91 criminal charges in total. And again, I think the core of it is the fake electors slates, which they referred to internally as fake electors or fraudulent electors. And they said internally this is an illegal vote counting scheme because they knew they were lying and effectively trying to steal the election. So is he a criminal? Absolutely he's a criminal. So on this point, I'm completely with Maher.
What is the forgery?
That's the slate of electors he was putting forward, the fake slate.
They even did a paper trail of fraudulent documents that they sent to Mike Pence to try to get Mike Pence to use that in his ceremonial role to certify Biden. They sent him these fraudulent documents saying, like, actually Trump won. And they're like, see, Mike, you can use this in order to say I won, even though they're fraudulent documents. They literally left a paper trail of their crimes. And again, I think that's the thing, first and foremost, that's going to come back to bite Trump in the ass and all of his little minions as part of his criminal scheme.
3 counts of solicitation of violation of oath by a public officer. So he's trying to get someone to violate their oath. 2 counts of conspiracy to commit forgery in the first degree. 2 counts of conspiracy to commit false statements and writing. 2 counts of false statements and writings. Violation of a Georgia RICO Act. Conspiracy to commit impersonating a public officer. Wonder what that is. Conspiracy to commit filing false documents and filing false documents. Then this is all based on the election results.
Well, there's also felony solicitation of violation of oath. Felony solicitation of violation of oath by a public officer. That was what when he was talking to Ratzenberger. That's the I need you to find me 11,000 votes. There's also one. I mean, there's two cases about trying to steal the election. One, the national case that Jack Smith is prosecuting. Then there's the one in Georgia. Now they cross paths in a lot. But basically, I mean, yes, he tried every possible way to steal this election. He tried to do it through the courts. He tried to do it through state legislatures. He tried to do it through intimidating Mike Pence. He tried to do it through the Justice Department. They talked about seizing voting machines. They talked about using the army. I mean, you can't really believe that this guy is not worse than Joe Biden. I mean, I agree. Biden is not a great president. And the Hunter Biden stuff is a stinky conspiracy, not a conspiracy, a stinky scandal that stinks to the high heavens. If you think that in any way compares to what Trump tried to do, you just cannot tell unlike things apart.
I got to say, I'm with Maher on this one. As smug and smarmy and annoying as he is, as insufferable as his personality is, I think he makes a good case. I think the bigger part of the conversation, which is left out because it gets lost in the noise of trying to steal the election and both of these guys being super old and one being one Big Mac away from a heart attack and the other one not being able to complete a sentence. What gets lost in all of that is just their policy record. We don't need to go into it here. You've heard me go into it 1,000 times, but just to give a few examples, Biden is doing the student loan debt reduction. After the Supreme Court tried to slap it down, he said, I'm going to go ahead and invoke the Higher Education Act and do it again, bitch. That's super based. He also pulled out of Afghanistan. That's super based. He did a 15% corporate minimum tax rate. A lot of these corporations were getting away with murder and paying nothing in taxes or a negative income tax rate, which is a net taxpayer from the subsidies. He came in and said, I'm putting a stop to that. They did the IRA. And they did a 15% corporate minimum tax rate. They did $15 minimum wage for every federal employee and contractor. I mean, the list goes on and on. 800,000 manufacturing jobs added under Biden because of the IRA and the CHIPS Act and a whole bunch of different pieces of legislation that he got through, by the way, with way fewer votes than Obama had. So on the policy front, and compare him to Trump, Trump's biggest accomplishment was a tax cut for the wealthy, where 83% of the benefits went to the top 1%. He also destroyed the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He took $1 million from the predatory payday loan industry, then dropped the regulations that were supposed to go against them to regulate them better, and also dropped the court cases that were going on against them for predatory practices. It's not really close, right? It's not really close. The only thing I'd change about the conversation is I wish Maher brought up some more policy stuff, although I do understand why one would focus on the trying to steal the election thing, because that's kind of a huge deal, probably the biggest deal of any of the issues in the election.
Have you ever tried to steel man his position? Like, do you think he really believes they stole the election, or do you think he's bullshitting?
Who gives a fuck?
I agree with Maher by saying who cares. That's point number one. But point number two is, in the Jack Smith indictment, I read the entire thing. There's a number of places where Trump either implies or outright says in some instances, like, yeah, of course I know I lost. There's one portion where they're talking about what to do vis-a-vis Iran, and he says, leave that to the next guy. In other words, like, I'm going to be out of office in a couple of weeks and Biden's going to take over. Leave it to him. It's a headache. I don't want to deal with it. He said to Mike Pence, when Mike Pence kept refusing to try to overturn the election, he goes, oh, Mike, you're too honest. Too honest. So in other words, he knows he's being dishonest and Mike Pence is being honest, which means he knows he lost. Again, there's a number of instances in the indictment that sort of lays it out that either he knew he was lying, or even if you want to say, oh, he didn't know he was lying, which isn't true. I think he knew he was lying. But even if you want to say, okay, he didn't know it, any reasonable person presented with the evidence he was presented with would have came to the conclusion, even if I think this is true, I can't go forward with it because I have everybody and their mother telling me this is not correct. I have all these credentialed people who, sir, we found no evidence of determinative election fraud. They had the Justice Department. You had Bill Barr. You had the various secretaries of states and governors in different Republican states telling him it's not correct. You had, judges all across the country, even Trump-appointed judges saying this is not right. So even if he thought it was real, which I don't think he did, but even if he thought that it was real and he won, every credentialed person would tell him no, and then he would fish for any psycho who would tell him the opposite. Like Sidney Powell, who had insane conspiracy theories about how Venezuela threw the election to Biden. Or Rudy Giuliani, who was drunk apparently 24/7, just telling Trump whatever he wanted to hear.
Who gives a fuck if he really believes it?
But I mean, if he really believes there's evidence that the election was rigged.
No, I don't care. No, first of all, that was part of the January 6th committee's findings. He has multiple people, all the people around him told him that he lost that election, including Bill Barr, and he admitted, one of his quotes was that they have on record of him saying, I don't want people to know I lost this election.
That's kind of crazy.
Well, he's crazy.
That's kind of crazy.
I mean, it's insane that you can't let go of the idea that you can't be seen as a loser. There is I always said this in the beginning. It all comes back to he is a clinical case of malignant narcissism. It's not just a quirk. It's actually in the big book of crazy, that.
Right.
I mean, it's a real thing, and it affects everything he thinks and does. It's why foreign leaders were able to curry favor with him. All they had to do was kiss his ass, and they got whatever they wanted. Do I really think that he wants to help Russia and Putin? I think Putin had him as soon as he said, Trump is a brilliant man. Good, you got me. It doesn't take that much. He's a dangerous guy. The idea that he could be president again, as opposed to Joe Biden, again, Joe Biden, not my first choice, not my 100th choice, but the other guy is a crazy, stupid criminal.
Fair. I think that's all fair. And I think he did a good job of presenting the case to the point where Rogan sort of was like, okay, yeah, I kind of see what you're saying. I kind of understand what you're saying. So Maher, for all of his flaws, there's still every now and then, there's a couple redeeming qualities or redeeming arguments in there. I mean, look, it's a case that needs to be made. In my estimation, I expected nothing of literally nothing of the Joe Biden presidency. Why? Because this is the guy who was a horrendous, very conservative Democratic senator. This is a guy who was in favor of NAFTA. He wrote the crime bill. He was in favor of the Iraq War and the Patriot Act. He has a horrendous record as a senator. So I expected that sort of governance as a president. It is not debatable. He is a much better president than he was a senator. So Biden and many of the Democrats are better than I expected them to be. And Trump and the Republicans are way worse than I expected them to be. So you mix that all together, it's not really a difficult question. It's controversial to say online. Well, who gives a fuck? It's the truth. So you got to say the truth. And like I said, for all of Maher's flaws, and he has many of them, most annoying, smuggest man on the planet, every now and then when he's right, it's fun to watch. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.